The flashing blue and red lights sliced through the darkness, washing over a lonely stretch of highway in rural Arizona. Trooper Vance Harding leaned his heavy frame against the door of a dusty Ford F-150. His face was a mask of bored authority. He peered inside at the driver, an old man whose calm expression immediately set Harding on edge. Great, Harding thought. Another one who thinks he can stare me down. License and registration. Harding barked, his voice sharp. The old man, Silas Jenkins, moved with a deliberate slowness that felt like defiance. Right here, trooper, he replied, his voice a low, steady rumble. From the passenger side of the patrol car, Trooper Leo Nash shifted his weight, his hand hovering near his pistol. You know why we pulled you over tonight? Busted taillight? Jenkins answered, not even glancing at the younger cop. Got the part at home. Just haven't found the time. Harding snatched the documents, his flashlight beam landing on the name, Silas Jenkins. He made a show of sounding it out. Silas Jenkins. Fancy name for this part of the county. He scanned the rest. Clean record. It only deepened his suspicion. That's an old Marine Corps jacket you've got on, Nash observed. Jenkins gave a slow, single nod. Served a long time ago. What branch? Harding pressed, leaning in. What unit? He wanted a reaction, a flicker of fear. Marines, Jenkins said calmly, his eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. Special reconnaissance. Harding's lips tightened into a smirk. He turned his head slightly toward Nash. Special reconnaissance, huh? Sounds real convenient. He muttered just loud enough for his partner to hear. Probably mopping floors. He then shoved the documents at Nash and nodded toward the glove box. Go ahead and pop that open for us. Jenkins didn't move for a second. Are you looking for something specific? Routine search, Harding lied, his voice dripping with condescension. Standard procedure when we stop your kind of vehicle. Jenkins' gaze finally flickered to him, holding it for a beat. There's a sidearm in there, he stated, his voice flat. A SIG P210. It's registered. A jolt of triumph shot through Harding. He had him. And you failed to declare that to us? You didn't ask, Jenkins replied. That was it. The calm, precise answer pushed Harding over the edge. He yanked the truck door open. Out. Hands where I can see them. Get out of the truck now. Silas Jenkins stepped out, his movements fluid, his hands held open. The quiet control he possessed infuriated Harding even more. The weapon is legal, Jenkins stated. I've had it since '82. It isn't loaded. But they weren't listening. Nash was already pulling out the heavy steel frame pistol. You got a permit for this? He barked. Yes, Jenkins replied, his eyes locked on Harding. Back pocket. Harding grinned, savoring the power. Is that so? He grabbed Jenkins by the shoulder, spun him roughly, and slammed him against the cold metal of the truck. Hands on the hood now. Jenkins complied without a word. Nash fumbled in his back pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He found the permit. His face fell. Vance. Nash hesitated. It's valid. State and federal, it's all here. Harding snatched the permit, glanced at it with contempt, and shoved it back at his partner. I don't care if it's signed by the damn president. Something about this stinks. He pulled out his handcuffs. You're taking a ride. The cuffs clicked shut, cold and final. As they marched him to the cruiser, Jenkins spoke quietly, almost to himself. You know, in '87 we pulled 9 civilians from a schoolhouse in El Salvador. Never even made the papers. Harding let out a cruel laugh. Yeah, and I used to pitch for the Yankees. Shut your mouth and get in the car. He shoved Jenkins into the back seat, the door slamming shut. At the station, Harding typed his report with smug satisfaction. Nash watched the old man in the holding cell. Hasn't moved an inch, Nash muttered. Just sits there. Kind of creepy. He's a nobody, Leo, Harding said, not looking up. An old man with a chip on his shoulder and a gun he shouldn't have. We did our job. Inside the cell, Silas Jenkins sat on the cold steel bench, watching the large clock on the wall. He wasn't counting with anxiety. He was counting with purpose. Deputy Linda Wallace approached from the front desk, a frown on her face. You two ran a full ID on him, right before you put him in a cell? We're getting to it. Harding waved her off. You're supposed to do that first, Vance, she pressed, her voice firm. That's protocol. What if he has a condition? What if his story checks out? He said he was special ops. Nash chuckled. Claimed he has clearance. If he's telling the truth, we'll find out when we run his prints. But the truth was already in motion. The moment Harding had hit enter on Silas Jenkins's name, a silent flag had been tripped on a server farm hundreds of miles away, buried deep in a secure federal facility. A single encrypted packet of data was now silently racing toward them. Think he's one of those vets who's lost his marbles? Nash smirked. The kind who thinks they were a secret agent? You'd be surprised what people will say to get out of a jam. Harding scoffed. From inside the cell, Jenkins's voice cut through the room, soft but firm. You boys ever been in a firefight? They all looked up. Harding walked to the reinforced glass. What did you say? I asked, Jenkins repeated, his eyes locking onto Harding's. If you've ever had to decide who lives and who dies, while a sniper has his crosshairs on a mother holding her child? Harding let out a short, harsh laugh. Oh, here we go. Story time. I remember her eyes, Jenkins continued, his voice dropping lower, pulling all the air from the room. She didn't speak a word of English, but I knew exactly what she was begging for. And I took the shot, not proud of it. But I did my duty. Silence. Even Nash stopped smiling. Believe me or don't, Jenkins added. But if you think I'm just some old man with a story, you're not paying attention. Harding stared, then turned away. He's messing with us. Don't fall for it. But as he turned back to his computer, a sharp icon blinked to life on the screen. It wasn't the usual blue or yellow flag for a local warrant. It was a single, stark red icon pulsating next to the name Jenkins, Silas. Before Harding could even point it out, the phone on the back wall rang. It was line 5, the direct outside line that never, ever rang. Wallace looked up. Harding hesitated, then snatched the receiver. Sheriff's office. The voice on the other end was cold steel. You have Silas Jenkins in custody. It was not a question.
Yeah.
Who is this? This is Agent Sterling. We are 7 minutes out. Do not move him. Do not question him. And under no circumstances are you to speak to him again. Is that understood? Harding's mouth went dry. Wait, what is this about? The line went dead.
Vance,
Wallace asked, standing up slowly. Who was that? Before he could answer, powerful headlights swept through the station's front windows, blinding them. 3 black, unmarked Suburbans glided to a silent stop. The doors opened in unison, and men in dark suits emerged, moving with a fluid, unnerving efficiency. The station door swung open. Agent Sterling stepped inside, flanked by his team. He was tall, sharp, and his presence immediately sucked all the authority out of Harding and Nash. They were no longer cops in their station. They were trespassers in his. Sterling's eyes scanned the room and locked onto the holding cell. He strode past Harding without a second glance. We'll take it from here. As one of his agents, a man named Price, plugged a secure laptop into a workstation, Sterling spoke without looking back. I want all footage, all paperwork, and a log of every word spoken to him since the moment of his arrest. Immediately. Hey, hang on, Harding stammered, his bravado crumbling. You can't just walk in here. Sterling stopped and turned his head slightly. His voice was quiet, but it hit Harding like a physical blow. Officer, you are currently detaining a protected federal asset. That man is not to be questioned or processed without direct clearance from the Pentagon. If you have a problem with my methods, I invite you to call them. Harding froze, the blood draining from his face. Inside the cell, Silas Jenkins looked up. A faint smile touched his lips. Not of triumph, but of weary resignation. Sterling walked to the cell, tapped a code into the electronic lock, and swung the door open. Sergeant Jenkins. Jenkins stood, his joints cracking softly. Took you long enough, Sterling. Traffic was a mess, Sterling replied. He glanced at the 2 stunned local cops. They treat you with respect. I've had worse, Jenkins said, his eyes on Harding. At least they only asked me what unit I served in once. Look, we didn't know who he was, Nash blurted out, his voice shaking. The weapon wasn't declared. We had to. You didn't know because you didn't listen. Agent Price cut in coldly from his workstation, never taking his eyes off the screen. And for that, you've both been flagged for mishandling a class-sensitive individual. Congratulations. The room was dead quiet. The word congratulations hung in the air like a death sentence. Agent Sterling turned his attention from the two frozen officers to Deputy Wallace, who stood by her desk. Deputy. Sterling's voice softened slightly. Were you involved in the arrest? No, sir, she answered quickly. I was on front desk duty. You're clear, he said with a nod. Then his gaze hardened as he looked back at Harding and Nash. The two of you don't move. Every word you've said, every action you've taken since you pulled Sergeant Jenkins over is now part of a federal investigation. If your body cam footage shows any mistreatment, you will be hearing from our legal branch. From his workstation, Agent Price's voice cut in cold and monotone as he read from a screen. Here's what you missed. Jenkins, Silas. Master Sergeant, retired, attached to the classified Task Force 11 throughout the 80s and 90s, stationed in locations that don't officially exist. Recipient of the Medal of Valor and a Pentagon citation for preservation of civilian life. Harding blinked, his mind struggling to catch up. But if he's a hero, why is he flagged in your system? Sterling walked slowly toward him. Because Sergeant Jenkins isn't just a veteran. He is part of a standing protection program for operatives whose past actions carry severe international consequences. He gestured toward the evidence bag with Jenkins's pistol. That SIG P210 you seized, it's the primary piece of evidence in a case that stopped an entire embassy from being overrun in 1989. There are certain people who would pay millions to get their hands on him or that weapon. Nash's face went pale. Wait, you mean someone might be tracking him? Not might, Price said without looking up.
Is.
Harding took a step back, as if the floor had become electrified. We had no idea. No, Sterling replied, his voice dangerously low. You didn't. You just saw an old man in a beat-up truck and made an assumption. And that's the problem. In the background, another agent finished downloading the dash cam and body cam files. Every smirk, every insult, every shove was now preserved on a secure federal drive. Jenkins watched them not with anger, but with a profound weariness. He looked like a man who had carried too many secrets for too long. Do you want to press charges for the arrest, Sergeant? Sterling asked him. Jenkins shook his head. Not worth the paperwork, but I would like my sidearm back. Price walked over and handed him the pistol in a sealed case. You're cleared, Sergeant. Jenkins took it, then turned to Harding. You ever get a gut feeling about someone, he asked quietly, and then choose to ignore it for an easier, uglier thought? Harding couldn't find a single word to say. Maybe next time, Jenkins added. You'll ask before you assume. As they prepared to leave, Deputy Wallace approached them. Sir, she said to Jenkins, holding something in her palm. I think these are yours. They were his dog tags. Jenkins took them, the worn metal cool against his skin. But the vindication was short-lived. The real danger was still outside. But why was he flagged so fast tonight? Wallace asked Sterling. Price answered for him, holding up a thin folder. 4 weeks ago, Sergeant Jenkins's name appeared on a leaked list from an old DIA archive. Someone is actively hunting down the names on that list. 3 of them are already missing. Jenkins gave a short, bitter laugh. So, you see why I don't appreciate being handled like a common criminal. Look, man. I'm sorry, Nash stammered. I didn't know. Jenkins looked him straight in the eye. No, you didn't, he said. But you should have treated me like a man. Not a problem you needed to solve. Sterling stepped forward. We've been trying to get men like Sergeant Jenkins off the grid before the wrong people find them. Tonight you put a spotlight on him. You increased the risk. The weight of his failure finally crushed Officer Harding. I'll write a full statement, he stammered. Jenkins met his gaze. Write it for yourself, he said. Not for me. "We need to move," Agent Sterling said sharply.
Now.
Desperate for any justification, Harding mumbled, "We were just doing our job." Sterling shot him a look of pure ice. "You were making a judgment." He took a step closer. "You want to know why we never lost track of him? Because the last time Sergeant Jenkins was activated, it was for a mission that was supposed to happen on American soil. If that had gone live, you'd be speaking his name with a hell of a lot more respect." "We have copies of everything," Agent Price announced from his workstation. "Dash cam, body cam, audio. It's all logged." Are we being investigated?" Nash asked, his voice cracking. "You're being reviewed for disciplinary action," Price stated flatly, not looking up from his screen. "Your report had better match our recording of every single word you said tonight." "We didn't use excessive force," Harding insisted, his voice cracking with desperation. Jenkins finally stepped forward, his voice cutting through their excuses. "You think I care about that? I've had snipers in tree lines. You think your handcuffs can shake me?" He looked at the two officers, their authority now completely gone. "I care about respect, the kind you give without being asked." As they turned to leave, Sterling's voice carried across the silent room. "A formal request for disciplinary review is being sent to the State Department. You arrested a protected federal asset, mocked his service, and ignored protocol." Nash sank into a chair, his shoulders slumping in utter defeat. 3 weeks later, the consequences became official. Trooper Leo Nash was permanently reassigned to desk duty, stripped of his patrol car and his pride. Trooper Vance Harding's badge was suspended indefinitely, his career in law enforcement effectively over. They had arrested a quiet old man in a worn-out truck, and in doing so, they had brought down a force of justice they never knew existed.